Hey folks, I'm just driving to the office Monday morning. Oh, I just realized I didn't submit my video to post it on Code Commute. Damn it. I have 2 videos ready to go up today. Oh, that's frustrating. Anyway, whatever, even more. There's going to be a ton of videos this week because I'm driving to the office every day because we got some guests coming in. I'm going to ExperiencedDevs for this topic, and this is about code reviews and basically people being, what feels like people being too pedantic or being like gatekeepers on code reviews to the point where it's not helpful. And so the poster on ExperiencedDevs, I'm not going to get into like the specific details of like their exact situation because I want to talk about this more generally. Because I've seen this, I lived through this. This has certainly shaped how I approach code reviews, especially as someone now that I'm managing engineering teams without actively contributing to the code base. I need to make sure that I take a stance that that my comments come across very clearly when I'm leaving them. So for folks that don't have a ton of experience, in different team settings, different companies, that kind of stuff. This might be kind of weird to kind of talk through and navigate if you don't have like some examples to be like, oh yeah, like I have kind of seen that, or yeah, that does kind of suck. So in a perfect world, we have code that goes up for review, and like I said, in a perfect world, it's small commits, things are understandable. You basically have team members that are reading through it, they can understand it, and to the point where everything's so clear to them that like they don't have comments about how things work, all the style stuff is followed, all of the conventions for like different architectural patterns are followed. You have all the right tests, people can see how it comes together, and like basically the review almost feels like a waste of time because everything is so clear. I mean, it kind of sounds ridiculous, but in a perfect world, that's kind of how it would go, to the point where you'd get to this situation where you're like, why are we even reviewing code if it's like if everything always comes together so perfectly like this? But the reality is like that's not real life. That's not how things go, for many different reasons. And I don't know if this woman's got a sign out the front that says caution children at play, and she's just like waving at people. There are in fact no children at play, but that's okay. So maybe she is a child at heart. And because we don't live in a perfect world, we have to think about like, well, what's the goal of the code review or the pull request review, and like how do we make this effective? It's yet another tool that we have in our tool belt as software developers, right? So there's lots of different benefits to code reviews and pull requests. Ideally we don't have to rely on humans to catch things, but that is like one of the benefits of code reviews. Now, another benefit is that you can educate people about what changes are coming in, so you can keep the team informed on the technical changes so they can see how the code base is evolving. It could be a learning opportunity for people on the team that are putting up the code. Like, hey, I'm trying my best to follow the patterns, but like, this is a new pattern we had to introduce, or I'm new to the team and I'd like some feedback on if I'm doing the right things. So there's all sorts of benefits, but like I said, in a perfect world, it's almost like the code review starts to feel like extra work because you have all of the communication up front. People know what's coming down the pipe. Everyone knows the patterns and best practices. It's just like, that's just not real. It's not like, you might get to that point on a team. I've certainly had a team where we were very close to that, but there were still things where like periodically we would catch escapes or something like that. And it's like, it means that there's some value being added, even when you have, maybe all of those other things kind of reduced to low value. Now, if we know what the goal of the pull request or a code review is, now we can try to think about like, how do we make these go more optimally? And unfortunately, like this Redditor was writing about, there are sometimes people on teams that are so hyper vigilant about kind of like nitpicking everything that goes through, that what happens is that there's like it forms a huge bottleneck. Okay, and it's not that what they're saying is no value. It's not that, and like it's impossible to know and make it this a perfectly generic statement across all of these situations, but you know, there might be situations where they are doing a really good job calling out things that like, hey, that needs to be changed, right? Like that's risky, or that's not the pattern we follow, or you know, you'll get people that they're so hyper vigilant about chasing down like white space, or like, you know, a variable is named well, but it's like it could be even better, and to the point where you're like, look, man, I can't even do my job. Like I can't do anything because any line of code I write, I have to go rewrite it. Like that's exactly how it feels. And then you multiply that across everyone else on the team, and it's like you actually end up having effectively one person gatekeeping everything that's being done on a team. Now, yes, there are situations where you might have a lot more newer team members or a lot more junior team members, and there's a lot of benefit to being able to catch a bunch of stuff like that. But statistically, that's not the norm. It's not the norm that like every single line of code that someone writes needs to be rewritten. And like, yes, we can always improve code, but if every single line of code you're writing, like the comment is like, this could be better, this could be better, it's like, yeah, everything could always be better. So the goal, like you need to establish this with your team, like get on the same page for what the goals are for your pull requests, or else you'll be spinning your wheels there and have a lot of friction, probably for not a lot of great reasons. There's a class of things that I feel like you can make a lot of progress on in terms of like reducing friction for code reviews. That's basically going to be like styling and linting code, right? Like I cannot tell you historically how many times I've seen people basically like rejecting reviews or blocking them for like something like white space. Like there's trailing white space on this line. Like not even your indentation's like really crazy and like I can't read this code, but like trailing white space, the end of the file, end of a line. You know, someone left a comment and there were 2 spaces somewhere in the comment, and they're like, well, no, that's like, we got to go back and change it. If you put linting in place where you can have your IDE do this, you can do it with like commit hooks, there's all sorts of different things that you can do to not have to worry about this and have consistent styling. This can dramatically improve the amount of time that you get back from what I would call like extreme bike shedding in programming. There's so little value in spending time on stuff like that, in my opinion. I'm not saying that like, you know, well, Nick, here's an example of a white space change that actually helps. Like, I'm not saying that there are zero. I tried to give you an example of even like, you know, if you have crazy indentation that's not consistent, and it's like, it's actually misleading to see, you know, if things are like logically grouped together. I get it. There's always going to be situations, but when you have all of these other scenarios and it's like, look, like if everything else is good to go on this and you want to gate me, like we have things like automatic merges and stuff like that. Imagine a pull request where everyone signed off on it before the end of the day, and then you have one person who basically denied it because of white space. Now you miss the integration build, you miss overnight where it gets deployed out to, like, this depends on the types of products and services you're doing. Now it's missing like multiple deployment trains to be able to start running in production because 2 extra spaces or like white space at the end of a line. Like, it's insane. And like that doesn't actually make a difference. Like, it's not like suddenly that's not readable. And if you're the kind of person who's like, oh, well, when I'm looking at diffs and like the white space at the end of the lines, like, dude, adjust your tools. Like, don't make this everyone else's problem. So invest into linting, have some code styling and standards. Yes, there are still things that can come up with this. So I've seen people where the rules become too strict and now you're constantly kind of battling against them. And it's just because like it's not consistent with the team and what the team actually wants. So I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but I think that it's the lesser of two evils. And if you can get a team that converges on a set of things, at some point, at least in my experience, you end up having like the team not really debating on this stuff anymore until you start seeing new patterns emerging and it's like, wait a second, maybe we need to adjust this. Or you're introducing some code that is truly an exception. I don't know, I've had this with like integrating with third-party libraries or something where we're like, hey, look, like we have a seam in the code and we have to do some funky stuff around that seam. And like that's breaking our linting, but it's constrained only to this spot. And like we need an exception to this. But that being an exception versus the commonplace means that you're not spending a ton of time getting blocked on what I would just see as dumb shit. Okay, so linting out of the way. The other thing that I think is really important is like, and I wanted to talk about this because someone in the comments of this Reddit thread was like, they had said something about like, you know, I use conventional commit messages. I think that's what they called it. There's like a spec for it. I am actually not even aware of this, but I can imagine sort of what it would look like. And they're saying that way I can, you know, people know if I'm leaving comments that like actually matter for the code. And someone commented and they said, well, like, what do you mean? Like, why would you leave a comment if it doesn't matter? And I think it's kind of just like slight miscommunication there. But I think what they're trying to say is like, if I'm leaving a comment that's like, I need you to change this, or like, we should talk about this because there's something that doesn't really sit well with me, that's the kind of stuff that I think you want to draw attention to and talk through. But making that obvious, right? Making that obvious versus like, to give you an example, when I'm going through stuff now, because I kind of said like I'm not really contributing to the code base, right? But I still will do reviews for my engineers when they ask for it. When I'm going through that kind of stuff, like if it's C# in particular, like I write a lot of C# code and I have for a long time. So there's things I can pick up on specifically to what I would call, you know, writing C# well, at least not terribly. So there are some things where I'm like, hey, like here's an opportunity, and I will explicitly say like this is a nitpick, and like, you know, or things where I'm like, hey, like this could be improved, but like if you're not going back to like make other changes, don't let this be the one that blocks your review. So I try to make sure that I'm educating, and that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on based on the comments in the Reddit thread. Like, why would you say something if it's not actually, you know, going to be gating? And it's that reason, it's education, to say like, hey, look, like here is an opportunity. It's not gonna make or break your current change. Like, I don't want to hold you back. And I know you're gonna be working in this area going forward. So like the next time you're coming through here, like something to think about is like, you know, naming things this particular way will make it more clear, or we don't, you know, in this file, we haven't done a good job with like some of the naming conventions, a little weird, and you're following that, so that's fine. But next time you're coming through, like maybe we should think about that a little bit more. Just like things like that aren't gating the current work. I don't want to gate the current work, but I'd like to inform people and give them options. Right? So I really like that education part and being able to write those things down. And that way people can say like, I actually disagree with that, right? They can say like, no, that's this way for a reason. Or they can say, oh, I didn't know that. There's other people on the review that are reading it. They might go, I didn't know that. Right? So there's just like, I find a benefit to having more communication that way, having it documented. Again, especially if it's like little things, it's not like leaving a comment to be like, oh, it's not a big deal, but, and then writing like a novel where people are gonna want to debate it or something like that. These are just things where it's like, you could tidy this up, you could clean this up, consistency things, we could make this better in the file or this area of the code. But I think it's a really good opportunity for education. I want to, because I'm most of the way to work now, halfway or something, I want to talk a little bit about, like, what do you do when someone's like basically being an asshole and it's not clear, or they're gating the entire team? Because this is like, I've lived through this. It's real. It's painful. First thing to recognize is that someone is trying to help. It may not feel like that. In some moments, they might feel like they're pissed off and like they're getting frustrated because they're like, why does this keep happening? And like, I keep having to leave these comments, like people aren't getting it. So like, it can be really challenging, not only for the people on the team, but even for the individual that's kind of doing it. They might be oblivious to it, and that's a thing too. But I think ultimately, I just want to remind people, because it often doesn't feel this way, people are not trying to be malicious. It's extremely rare that you have someone that's just being an asshole because like they get excited about being a piece of shit to people. There's probably some other motivation, and I just want you to keep this in mind as you're going through this kind of stuff, because if your immediate reaction is to also get defensive and to get frustrated, now you have potentially two sides that are feeling that way, and you're going to be head to head. Or you're going to be getting frustrated, you're going to want to go on the offensive because you're fed up, and this person doesn't actually even realize that they're becoming a bottleneck or a pain in the ass for others. So I understand that these types of things can be frustrating, but please start this journey by trying to remind yourself people are not being malicious. They are just trying to help. I think when you go into things like this and you frame things that way, it sets you up to try understanding why people are doing certain things. Okay, so instead of just trying to go, nope, I got to tell Johnny that he's an asshole and like I'm fed up with him blocking my pull requests, or, you know, Johnny is the worst on pull requests, I'm just going to stop adding him. That way I can just avoid him altogether and I can finally get my work done. Instead of doing this, if you try to understand, like, Johnny keeps doing this on pull requests, like it's always, he's nitpicking white space or like these little things that I don't get. Like, again, like, why is he doing that? Well, you could go talk to him. Maybe it's a matter of like, hey, look, like we don't have linting. Johnny, like, maybe this is something that you could push for, right? Like, Johnny, if you keep, I see that you're spending a lot of time looking at like these white space changes and stuff like that. And like, seems like right now, a lot of people don't seem to really be bothered by that. So it's creating overhead, but like you seem to really care about this. So like, I'd like to understand more about that. Oh, it's your diffing tools, or whatever the reason happens to be. Great. Like, thanks for explaining that to me. Cool. Like, this ends up costing us a lot of overhead in terms of like our context switching or whatever else. And like, I wonder if there's a better way. Like, could we run a linting tool, or could we do something else to make sure that this stuff is automatically done? And that way you don't even have to go looking for this stuff anymore. It just kind of happens. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just giving you one example with like the white space and the linting, but if you seek to understand why people are being frustrated, you can literally partner with them on trying to solve problems with them. And that's easier said than done, because the hardest part is like trying not to just get frustrated with the other person and then trying to make some space to actually talk with them, because we are terrible at this. It's a difficult thing to do. So I don't mean to minimize it and say it's trivial, but like, honestly, we could solve or improve a lot of situations by actually just talking with people. But it's a lot easier for us to like avoid or to like talk about it without them, because we're just, it's avoiding a difficult conversation. So that's one example. Another thing is like, and this is maybe pretty obvious, but if you're noticing that people are, writing like novels in pull requests and like there's a lot of debates back and forth, get on a call. If you're in person, talk in person, get it hashed out. I have found that many, many, many times people are roughly on the same page. There's going to be situations where someone didn't know about something, of course, but I've seen people go back and forth debating things, arguing, and it's like they talk about it and they're like, oh, like you were actually saying something pretty close to me and I was saying something pretty close to you, and like now we can see that, and now we can focus on like, dive into the detail about what we didn't agree on, come up with the path forward. But it's sometimes people get into these code review comments, and it's really just about how do I prove myself right and the other person wrong. And it's not productive. I'm sure many of you have experienced this. Like, catch it early and just be like, hey, cool, like message them on the side, be like, hey, let's get on a quick call, talk about it. Just like think about trying to get to resolution. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong, because the point is your code is blocked. And if it's not your code, it's the other person, like their code's blocked. Like your team is blocked from delivering progress because you guys can't agree. So the goal is just to get unblocked and start moving forward, right? The goal is not who can be the most right. It just doesn't matter. What else? I've had to, for what it's worth, I've had to have a conversation with an individual in my career. And this was like a learning experience for me as a manager. And I want to share this with you because I think that, number one, it's a really good learning for me, but I'm hoping that you can take the lesson and apply it. You don't have to be a manager for this at all. It's a feedback kind of thing. So I've worked with someone in the past that they were kind of like this on code reviews and stuff. And truly, their intention was not malicious. They were like, from their experience, they've had to go back and fix a bunch of things when people didn't understand it. And so they would gatekeep a lot, or they would like rewrite people's code and just be like, oh no, like I did it, now it's better, and like kind of unsolicited. But there was a lot of stuff that was like, you're like, man, you got to stop doing that. And like people would not want to put them onto pull requests and code reviews. Like it just became a really big problem because he would be the entire bottleneck for the team. And then what would happen is people would either suffer through it, or they'd be like, well, screw that. Like, I see he's the bottleneck. How do I make my way around this? And then sometimes he would find out about changes and go and rewrite them. So it was like, there's a problem here. And I think as a manager, I let that go on for too long. I was observing it because I was also contributing to the code base. So like, I felt that personally. And then it's like, well, is that a me problem? And even if it was just a me problem, I should have gone and talked to him about it, and I didn't originally. So, part one of the lesson, like that was me not doing probably what I should have. And then I was getting some feedback from individuals, and it's like, okay, like it's not just me, okay. And then, so now I know it's not just me. I know that there's other people on the team experiencing it. And I think like I started to learn, like, I'm getting frustrated, of course, because I'm living through it. But from like working with him, I'm realizing that he's a lot of the time doing this because it's like he doesn't trust the people on the team. Not because he thinks they're evil or sneaky or something. He doesn't trust their experience. And like he has a lot of pride in the code base. So And that means when something's wrong, he's like, well, I need to be responsible to fix it. Like, it's coming from a good place. It doesn't seem that way on the surface when you're looking at these things. You're like, dude, this asshole's rewriting my code like without telling me. And like, well, I'm going to keep having to dodge him and not add him onto code reviews because I don't want him doing that to my stuff. You just create this like, you know, this growing void, this separation of people on the team instead of coming together. And he's doing it because he doesn't have a lot of trust. He wants to make sure that, like, you know, he's going to be the one that has to go, you know, solve the problems later anyway. So he might as well make sure that it's done right, air quotes, done his way so he understands it, like that kind of thing. And I let it go on for too long. And by the time I gave this individual feedback, you know, I can remember this conversation, even though it was many years ago. Not the exact specifics of it, but I can remember, like, probably one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. And I've had to, unfortunately, let go of people too. And this was really hard. And I think that it was so hard because I realized, like, it's gone on for a long time and I haven't brought it up. And I had to give them kind of this, you know, this feedback where it's like, hey, like, we got to talk about this because, you know, and I had said something like, there's a lot of feedback coming from the team where people are getting frustrated and they're finding it really difficult to work with you on this kind of stuff. They feel like they can't collaborate with you because, like, basically it has to be done your way and there's no other way. Like, you end up being the bottleneck for this. And I can remember it wasn't like, he wasn't like immediately like angry or like no, like, you don't get it. He was kind of just sitting there like, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I could tell he was just like completely destroyed by that feedback. Like, he was hurt. Because, like I said, his intentions were always to try and help. And I just remember, like, he was kind of sitting there processing it. He was like, I just wish that someone would have told me sooner. Wasn't like up in arms trying to like argue with me about it. It was just like, I could tell he was torn apart. And he was like, I just wish someone would have told me sooner. Because he felt embarrassed by it. Like, he wanted to be helping. He thought he was helping. And here the feedback is me doing a shitty job of giving it to him. Like, hey, basically everyone thinks that you're hard to work with and you suck for it. Like, that's not good. And what would have worked a lot better is giving him that feedback along the way, trying to catch it early, trying to be like, hey, let's not make this a thing. So I encourage all of you that are listening or watching, like, if you're going through stuff like this on your team, please try to have conversations with the person sooner. You don't have to be a manager at all. You don't have to like sit there and take it and be upset and then like only let your manager like let them know and wait for them to do something about it. I can promise you that if you have a conversation with a peer about this kind of thing, it will be so much more meaningful that you do it. And when I coach people on my teams, I will give them similar types of setups. I will say, look, like, if for any sort of interpersonal challenge, like, I'm happy to support you on this. I can make sure I can dig into this a little deeper, understand from the other person's side. If you need me to do it, I can talk to them about it in some way that you feel comfortable about. Maybe that's not like keeping you anonymous, whatever. But I always say, like, I can do these things, but I highly recommend that you have a conversation with them. And if you feel uncomfortable about that, I would personally much rather spend time like coaching you through that so you can have that conversation than the initial part I proposed. But I always kind of give them that option and say, look, like, if it's at a point where you feel like you can't do anything and like this working relationship's very bad, I'm like, I can step in to go help. I just think it's significantly less effective. It might it might seem like effective on the surface, where it's like, look, manager comes in, manager's going to diffuse the situation, blah, blah, blah. And then you might be listening to this and being like, well, Nick, otherwise it just sounds like you're trying to avoid doing your job. No, what I'm trying to do is coach people to have those conversations so they don't need me to mediate future conversations. I'm trying to coach them so they have the tools to do this so that they can do it early, they can do it often, because this is the kind of thing that will always be there in your career. You will always have these situations where there's some type of friction, you know, code reviews, projects you're working on, anything. There's always going to be this kind of stuff. So I would much rather give people tools so that they can navigate that. You don't need me for that. I'm happy to help, but I would rather give you the tools and help you practice that stuff, guide you through it, give you confidence, so that you don't need me or anyone else, right? This spot is terrible. Why do I park here? One sec. But anyway, some things to think through about pull requests, code reviews. I hope that's helpful. I realize it's kind of all over the place, but something to think about. So thanks so much for watching. If you have questions, leave them below in the comments, or you can send them in anonymously at codecommute.com. There's a contact form there. Check the box. It says anonymous. Happy to try and answer anything career related or software engineering related that I can. I'm just a guy. I got experiences and opinions, and I will try to give you as much context as I can from my experience, and hopefully find it helpful. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.